In a time before the age of iron, before the great stone cities rose and fell, there was a land known only to its people as Eldoria. It was a place of sun-drenched valleys and hills that rolled like green waves to meet the horizon. The rivers ran clear as day, their beds lined with smooth, pale stones, and the forests held secrets whispered on the wind, secrets that the Eldorians never sought to uncover. They were a gentle folk, content to live by the seasons. Their days were measured by the sun's slow journey from mountaintop to mountaintop, and their nights were lit by a moon so bright it cast shadows like a second silver sun. They tended their fields of golden grain, wove intricate tapestries of flax and wool, and sang songs of the earth and the sky, songs so old they carried the echo of the world's very beginning. Their lives were a calm and steady stream, following the course set by their ancestors, and in their humble cottages, a sense of peace, so deep and true, settled upon every heart. This peace, however, was woven of a fragile thread, a thread so fine that it would soon be pulled and stretched until it snapped. It began with the stars. For as long as memory served, the stars of Eldoria had been fixed, each constellation a familiar tale etched into the velvet night. But one evening, as the first chill of dusk settled over the fields, the stargazers of the highest village noted a faint point of light, a new star that had not been there the night before. It was a fleeting thing at first, a pinprick of violet that shimmered with an unnatural light, unlike the steady glow of the constellations they had always known. It was so subtle that most dismissed it as a trick of the eye, a glint of stray moonlight or the reflection of a passing thought. Yet it was there, and it lingered. It was a mystery, a silent question mark in a sky that had always offered only clear answers. With each passing night, the tiny violet star grew, its color deepening to a shade of bruised plum, and its light pulsing with a strange, rhythmic beat. It moved not like a star, but like a silent tear, weeping slowly across the firmament, leaving no trail behind it. The Eldorians, a people who had never known fear of the heavens, began to gather in hushed groups, their songs of the earth replaced by quiet murmurs of unease. They watched as the familiar patterns of the sky seemed to shift around this unwelcome traveler, as if the very constellations were recoiling from its presence. A strange metallic taste began to cling to the morning dew, and the ancient stone circles, where the elders once met to share their wisdom, seemed to hum with a low and discordant vibration. An unseen thread of change had begun to pull, and in the heart of that peaceful land, a shadow that had never before been known began to stir. In the heart of that peaceful land, a shadow that had never before been known began to stir, and as the moon waned and waxed again, the violet tear in the sky swelled from a pinprick to a glimmering star, and then to a blazing eye. On the night of the full moon, as the Eldorians gathered to watch its silent, slow-paced journey, it paused. It hung motionless for a moment, a pulsing heart of deep, bruised plum, before it streaked across the firmament, no longer a tear, but a silent arrow of light that vanished over the dark line of the great forest. There was no thunder, no great boom, just an eerie, ringing silence that followed its disappearance, leaving the villagers standing in the fields, their mouths agape, their ancient songs of praise forgotten. The elders of the village, their faces pale in the moonlight, spoke in hushed tones of signs and spirits. Some whispered that it was a blessing, a gift from the sky gods sent to bless their harvest. Others spoke in trembling voices of a curse, a fallen star meant to bring forth a great pestilence. In the flickering firelight, the children huddled close to their parents, and the old folk tales of mischievous sprites and sleeping giants took on a new, more mysterious meaning. But among them was a girl named Alara, whose heart was filled not with fear, but with a burning curiosity. While the other villagers were telling stories to chase away the unease, and the elders were consulting the old prophecies, Alara found herself drawn to the edge of the forest. The woods, which had always been a place of wonder and peaceful green shade in the daylight, now seemed to hold a new, silent weight. Under the cover of the midnight mist, with only the silver light of the moon to guide her, she slipped away from her cottage and into the dark wood. She moved past the whispering ferns and the gnarled sleeping trees, following a path that was not marked on any map, a path that existed only in her mind and in the direction of the strange, metallic taste that still clung to the air. The leaves rustled like secrets under her bare feet, and the night creatures were hushed, their usual calls and chirps replaced by an unnatural stillness. She walked for what felt like an age, her heart beating a steady drum against her ribs, until she came upon a small, open clearing where the air felt strangely cold, and the ground beneath her feet was no longer soft earth, but something hard and smooth, as though polished by a hand that was not of this world. There was no sign of a great fall, no scorched earth or broken branches, but from behind a cluster of ancient twisted trees, a faint shifting glow emanated. It was the same violet light that had filled the sky, but here it was not a single point, but a gentle haze that danced silently, casting long, strange shadows. Ilara crept closer, her breath held in her throat. She could sense something, a presence that was neither good nor bad, but simply there, a being of immense, quiet power. It was waiting, silent and still, in the heart of the forest, a strange visitor who had fallen from the heavens and now rested. A secret known only to the trees, the night, and a girl whose curiosity had led her to the very edge of the unknown. In the cold, strange light of the next morning, the secret that Ilara had discovered was a secret no more. As the sun crept over the horizon, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and gold, a figure emerged from the tree line of the great forest, walking with a strange, gliding motion that left no trace on the dewy grass. It was not of this world, nor of any creature known in the Eldorian folk tales. Its form was tall and slender, draped in a shimmering dark material that seemed to absorb the light, yet its skin glowed with a soft inner luminescence, a shade of pearlescent gray that pulsed with a faint violet light, the same light that had fallen from the heavens. Its limbs were too long, its movements too fluid, and its face, with its great dark eyes and a mouth that was little more than a whisper of a line, held an expression of profound, quiet observation. A hush fell over the village. The farmers who were already at their work froze in their fields, their hands still on their tools. Children at play stood as still as statues. The women who were tending to their fires stepped back into the shadows of their doorways, their hands pressed to their mouths in silent shock. The being was neither beautiful nor monstrous, but simply alien, a living question in the face of a world that had always had an answer for everything. Some whispered in trembling voices that it was a demon, a trick of the woods to lure them to their doom. Others spoke of a divine presence. A star spirit descended to bring a great blessing. The creature glided to the center of the village, its gaze sweeping over the silent, watching faces of the Eldorians. A low melodic sound escaped its lips, a series of clicks and soft hums that carried no meaning to mortal ears, though it seemed to be a sound of great sadness. It raised a hand, its fingers long and delicate, and gestured toward the sky, then to the earth, as if trying to bridge the immense gap between its world and theirs. But the villagers, with their simple language of grain and sky and water, could not understand. Their fear was a thick, suffocating thing, and the silence it brought was louder than any word. They could only see a being whose form defied their understanding, a being whose voice was a song of a world they could not comprehend. The quiet attempts at communication were met with only more whispers and more fear. In the gathering confusion, the elders of the village, their faces etched with the weight of generations, consulted their diviners. The wise men, who had always read the signs in the flight of birds and the patterns of the river stones, now stood baffled. They brought out their sacred scrolls and ancient relics, but nothing in their lore spoke of a visitor from a star, a being whose very presence was a mystery. The priests, who communed with the earth spirits and the sky gods, could only bow their heads, for this creature was neither of the earth nor the sky as they knew it. The people of Eldoria, who had always found solace in their ancient ways, now found themselves at a loss, their wisdom inadequate, their traditions powerless. As the sun climbed higher, casting its bright, ordinary light on a most extraordinary day, the alien stood motionless in the center of the village, a silent, misunderstood guest, and the elders and the diviners sought an answer, in a world that had suddenly become far larger and far more terrifying than they had ever imagined. It was in this moment of profound confusion that a small boy, with the sun-streaked hair of a summer's day and eyes the color of the river stones, quietly stepped from behind his mother's skirt. His name was Kale, and he knew nothing of prophecies or demons, only of kindness. In his small, dirt-stained hand, he held a single ripe strawberry, a gift from his garden, a perfect red heart. He walked slowly, without a hint of fear, to the alien's side and held the fruit up in his open palm. The village held its breath, a single, collective gasp. The alien's great dark eyes, so full of sorrow and distance, lowered to meet the boy's gaze. It paused for a long, silent moment. Then its slender hand, glowing with that soft inner light, gently brushed against Kale's fingertips as it took the offering. The touch was as light as a butterfly's wing, and a soft, humming sound, like a contented bee, emanated from the creature. A single tear, a drop of something clear and bright, slipped from its eye and fell to the earth, where a small patch of grass, dry and yellowed from the summer's heat, instantly turned to a vibrant, living green. From that day on, the fear that had gripped Eldoria slowly began to loosen its hold. The children, quick to see the goodness in the gesture, gave the creature a name: Star Whisper. They would gather around it, and in their presence, Star Whisper seemed to unburden itself of a great invisible weight. It began to respond to their gentle ways with small, profound acts of its own. When a farmer's scythe broke, Star Whisper would lay its hand upon it, and the metal would fuse back together, stronger than before, without heat or fire. When an old woman was taken with a fever that stole her breath, the creature simply rested its hand on her brow, and the fever fled, replaced by a deep and peaceful sleep. One day, a wolf from the forest, emboldened by the village's strange quiet, ventured too close, its teeth bared in a snarl. As the men reached for their spears, Star Whisper simply turned its head toward the beast, and a wave of silent light, gentle as a summer breeze, washed over the wolf, and it turned away, its rage replaced by a quiet, docile calm. The villagers, who had feared a curse, now found themselves blessed. They watched, their hearts now filled with a bewildered wonder, as the alien who had fallen from the stars became the quiet, miraculous keeper of their peace. A strange visitor who had come not to conquer, but to heal and to mend the broken things. But this bewildered wonder was a brittle thing, and as the seasons turned, a new kind of fear began to creep into the minds of the Eldorians. The whispers returned, no longer of demons or blessings, but of power. How could one being mend a scythe without a forge? How could it banish a fever with a touch? To the hunters and warriors, those who had always guarded the village from the dangers of the forest, the alien's abilities seemed unnatural and dangerous. They saw its power as a threat to their ancient ways, to the strength they had built with their own hands and the order they had maintained for generations. The simple acts of kindness were viewed with suspicion, and the rumors began to spread like a wildfire in a dry field. People whispered that Star Whisper had not come to help them but to weaken them, to make them dependent, to steal their spirit and their will. It was said that the creature from the sky was a silent, cunning enemy, an omen that had not yet revealed its true, destructive purpose. The Council of Elders, still unable to explain the being, found their authority waning against the rising tide of mistrust. The hunters, their faces hardened by a lifetime of facing tangible threats, gathered in a tense circle around their leader, a man named Draven, with a grim, determined jaw. They argued that it was their duty to protect the village from the unknown, and that Star Whisper's very existence was a constant peril. Some spoke of trapping the creature, binding it to prevent any harm, while others, more fearful, argued that the only way to ensure the village's safety was to strike it down, as one would a wild beast. Their heated voices and the sight of their hands resting on the handles of their spears sent a shiver through the village. But as their fear grew louder, so too did the small, brave voices of dissent. Kale, with his small hands balled into fists, stood before the hunters, his voice trembling but his words clear. He spoke of the strawberry, of the healed woman, of the calm wolf, and of the many small kindnesses that had proven the alien's good heart. He was joined by others who had witnessed Star Whisper's gentleness, people whose lives had been touched by its strange, miraculous power. They pleaded with the hunters, reminding them that fear was a poor guide, and that kindness was a strength of its own. But the two sides stood apart, a chasm of fear and trust growing between them, as the silent, misunderstood keeper of their peace waited for a resolution, a peaceful visitor in a world on the brink of a terrible choice. But the world, as it turned out, did not wait for the Eldorians to make their choice. The summer sun, which had always been their greatest ally, now turned into their most terrible enemy. The skies, usually filled with soft, rain-bearing clouds, became a relentless, brazen blue. The streams that fed the river dwindled to trickles, and the river itself shrank, revealing its ancient, dry bed of pale stones. The fields of golden grain, once so full and vibrant, now stood brittle and brown, their stalks rustling like old bones in the dry wind. A great thirst settled upon the land, and the Eldorians, for the first time in memory, knew the gnawing fear of famine. It was then, as the very life of the village seemed to be withering away, that a stray spark from an old fire pit was caught by the wind and carried into the parched, tinder-dry forest. A great pillar of smoke, black and terrible, rose into the sky, and in moments the forest that had sheltered them for generations was consumed by a raging inferno, a wall of fire that roared toward their fields and their homes. The hunters and warriors, their spears useless against such an enemy, stood helpless as the heat of the fire licked the air. The fearful villagers, whose whispers of a curse had only a few days prior been a matter of gossip, now looked upon the approaching fire and saw a terrible prophecy fulfilled. In that moment of shared despair, as the villagers watched their world burn, Star Whisper glided to the edge of the village, standing alone against the onrushing wall of flame. Its body, normally so still, was alive with a fierce, pulsing violet light that seemed to pulse with a low, vibrant hum, a sound that resonated deep within the ground. The creature raised its hands, not in a gesture of communication, but of command. The villagers watched, stunned, as a wave of cool, shimmering energy, like a curtain of liquid moonlight, flowed from its outstretched hands and spread across the parched earth before the fire. The air grew instantly cold, and a great thick mist rose from the ground, so dense it seemed to hold the very moisture of the river that was no more. The fire, which had been a hungry, roaring beast, hit this wall of mist and hissed, its flames sputtering and dying, its terrible roar reduced to a quiet, angry whisper. The wall of mist held, a shimmering living thing that absorbed the heat and fire, protecting the village completely. The villagers, their faces streaked with soot and tears, watched as the raging inferno that had threatened to devour them was held at bay by a gentle, silent power they could not begin to fathom. When the last ember had died, and the sun rose over a scorched, desolate landscape that had once been a great forest, the village stood unharmed, a green, living island in a sea of ash. To Kale and the others who had defended Star Whisper, this was irrefutable proof. This was not a demon but a savior, a guardian sent by the heavens to protect them in their time of greatest need. They spoke of the magnificent power that had saved their children and their homes, and the words of the hunters, which had been so loud and so full of suspicion, now seemed to crumble into ash. But as the villagers looked upon their saved homes and their new, dry world, the hunters looked upon Star Whisper with a different kind of fear. They saw not a protector, but a being of such unfathomable power that it could control the very elements, a power that could just as easily destroy them as save them. For Draven and his men, the greatest threat was not the fire that had come from the land, but the mysterious being whose power came from the stars, a power they could not understand, and therefore a power they could never trust. The terrible choice was not yet over. It had only been postponed. Sensing the renewed tension and the brittle mistrust that still clung to the air, Star Whisper moved toward the center of the village, a silent, graceful being whose very presence was a question they could not answer. It stood before the council of elders and the grim-faced hunters, and for the first time, its gaze settled not upon the people, but upon the very earth beneath its feet. A soft humming sound, more profound than any heard before, emanated from its form, and the air filled with the scent of starlight and new-turned soil. A single, shimmering mote of violet light detached itself from Star Whisper's core and floated into the air, growing larger until it became a pulsing sphere of gentle light, a miniature sun that cast no shadows. As the Eldorians watched, transfixed, the sphere began to show them things. It showed them a world of violet skies and shimmering spires, a world where the people were as gentle and luminous as Star Whisper itself. They saw their star, a great ancient orb, beginning to wane and dim, its light fading into the long cosmic night. They saw a great sorrow in their people's eyes, a sadness not of war or strife, but of a slow, inevitable end. Then the vision shifted. They saw Star Whisper and others like it boarding silent, star-spun vessels, leaving their beloved, dying world behind, not to conquer or to flee, but to carry the seeds of their knowledge to a new home. They saw 1,000 journeys through the dark sea of space, 1,000 silent searches for a world with life, a world that could be a final repository for a fading people's wisdom. The vision showed them the Eldorian lands, so vibrant and full of life, and it showed them the land's own quiet sorrow, the subtle cries of the earth as it thirsted and grew dry. Star Whisper had not fought the fire to save them, but to comfort the land, to soothe its fever with a touch. The fire was a symptom of the earth's own pain, and the alien had simply answered that call, just as it had answered Kale's small offering of kindness. As the last of the visions faded, and the village returned to the familiar light of the Eldorian sun, the people stood in silent awe. They had seen not a demon, not a curse, but a sacred refugee, a keeper of ancient wisdom who had fallen from the sky not by accident, but by purpose, a being who sought to share its knowledge and its gentle power. The world they had thought so small and contained now felt vast and limitless, and they realized that their story was not their own, but a single thread in a great cosmic tapestry of a time before. In the days that followed, the land, still scorched and thirsty, seemed to reflect their own quiet turmoil. Star Whisper, the sacred refugee, had shared its truth, but its purpose remained a mystery. It continued to move among them, mending and soothing, its power now viewed with reverence rather than suspicion. Yet a deep sense of sadness had settled over the village. The Eldorians, who had once been so eager to see the being depart, now felt a cold dread at the thought of its absence. For the first time, the hunters, led by a humble Draven, approached the creature not with spears, but with a silent plea in their eyes. The fire that had threatened their homes was a distant memory, replaced by a new, more profound fear, that their gentle visitor would one day leave them and their fragile world to its own fate. They now saw that Star Whisper was not just a protector in a time of crisis, but a living embodiment of the wisdom they had lost. A final, beautiful gift that could not last forever. On the third day after the vision, as the morning mist rose from the scorched earth, Star Whisper glided to the very center of the ancient stone circle where the elders once met. It was here, at the heart of Eldoria's history, that the creature began its farewell. Its inner light, which had always been a gentle violet, now pulsed with a vibrant emerald green, and its melodic hum filled the air, resonating not with sadness but with a quiet, joyful resolve. The Eldorians gathered, their sorrow a tangible presence in the cool morning air. Star Whisper raised its long, slender hands, and from its fingertips, a shower of fine, shimmering emerald dust fell to the ground. The dust, in a soft whisper of light, sank into the dry earth and vanished. In the exact spot where the dust touched the ground, a single perfect seed, no bigger than a grain of sand, sprouted into a magnificent tree, its branches reaching toward the sky, laden with fruit that glowed with the same gentle green light. One by one, in a slow, silent cascade, the luminous dust fell, and 1,000 tiny seeds took root, each one a promise of new life. Star Whisper, with its final magnificent gift, was not just leaving them with a memory of its power, but with a living, breathing testament to its love for the land and its people. With this last act of creation, the luminous dust stopped falling, and the creature's body, which had been so full of light, began to fade. The Eldorians watched in heartbroken silence as Star Whisper became a faint, shimmering outline, a ghost of its former self, its great dark eyes fixed upon the stars. With a final faint click that was a whisper of a goodbye, its form dissolved, leaving behind only the scent of fresh soil and a great forest of new, strange trees. The Eldorians did not weep. They simply stood, humbled and in awe. The hunters, their spears lowered, looked at Draven, their grim-faced leader, and in his eyes, they saw not anger, but a profound and gentle sorrow. Kyle, the small boy who had offered a strawberry, now ran his fingers over the bark of a new tree, his heart filled with a loss so great it felt like a part of himself had vanished. From that day on, the Eldorians lived not just by the sun and the moon, but by the memory of their visitor from the stars. The new forest, with its glowing emerald fruit, became a sacred place, a living library of Star Whisper's knowledge. And so the story was passed down, from generation to generation, in the songs they sang and the stories they told around their fires. It was a legend of a time when the stars had wept a gentle tear, and a quiet, sacred refugee had fallen to their world, not to conquer or to curse, but to give, to heal, and to teach them that they were never truly alone, and that even in the smallest of worlds, great acts of kindness could echo through the vast and endless cosmos.